why should Christians, Catholics, people of faith, people who care about freedom engage in the political sphere, but also specifically engage this year? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, it's important. I mean, when I talk to people of faith, it's important for us to let our voice be heard, to stand up for the values we believe in. And really, now more than ever, I think we have to look at the future of our children, and
Yeah.
I have 4 kids, and I really feel like I've turned a corner in my own life where a lot of the things that I feel like I'm called to do, I've had my ministry heyday. I've been on amazing stages. I've had incredible opportunities and open doors. I mean, more than I ever thought I would have. But I feel like right now my focus is really the next generation. What kind of society, what kind of nation are my kids going to inherit? What kind of culture are they going to grow up in? Like, what is it actually going to look like for their generation? And what can I do with my life to help set them up for success? And so I think when you look at the world right now, and you see the way that things are going, you see the cancel culture, you see the mob, you see the pressure, you see the outright hatred for believers and Judeo-Christian values.
Yeah.
I mean, we are in the midst of a war, and I think that we have to fight, and it's important for us to fight. And there's so much biblical, theological precedent for us to be those people that stand up and let our voice be heard. And one of the ways we can do that in our society is at the ballot box.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, and I'm 100% on board with you, Sean. And so we talked about the why question, but so the question then is how should Christians and Catholics and people of faith engage? Because I think people who are busy, who have personal lives, they're starting a business, they're getting married, they're trying to graduate from college, they're doing all these different things, or maybe they got 5 kids, or maybe they had personal tragedy, whatever it is. How should they engage? What are your thoughts on that?
How they should engage and politically?
Yeah, how to engage and how to see politics the right way, because Christians can engage, but then it's possible to totally miss it.
The sad part is that I've looked at the data. I know in California specifically, the church just doesn't engage. The church doesn't vote. I mean, you can look at the numbers, and I think less than 20% of the church actually votes in a presidential election. And because we have abdicated our voice from being heard, our state, I'll just take my state, for example, is in crisis. It's a dumpster fire. We have the highest homeless population. We have the highest taxes. We're overrun by corrupt politicians. Our governor is telling us not to sing in church. I mean, how did we get here? Well, the church didn't stand up. The church didn't go to the polls. The church didn't advocate. We didn't have leaders that stressed the importance of engaging in their civic responsibility. So, we are the ones to look to. There's a Bible verse that says judgment begins in the house of God. In order for us to right the ship in America, we have to right the ship in the church, and we have to get people to engage. We have to get people to stand up. We have to get people to and it's funny, there's one way to say, be a good Christian and engage. There's another thing to say, just be a good American, like just be an American and vote, like use your privilege that so many people have laid down their lives for in our nation. So many wars have been fought for our freedom. Take advantage of that and let your voice be heard.
Yeah, exactly. And I really feel that very strongly. And I think, Sean, as you're talking about that, tell me what your thought is on this, but I've talked with a number of people about this. And one thing I find so many times is when I talk with pastors and Christian leaders, there are so many pastors and Christian leaders who just don't want to go there. They don't want to talk about it at church. They don't want to talk about it with their congregation because they're concerned about, what's this going to do? Is someone going to leave the church? Or what's this going to do to my church if I talk about politics? If I talk about something that is in any way related to politics? If they talk about abortion and the pro-life issue, if they talk about a number of things. And so for me, one thing that I have seen that I've had a huge problem with is I just feel like there's a lack of discipleship in, let's say, in the Christian or Catholic church. And what usually happens is when the church is not discipling itself, or the leaders are not discipling the church to understand politics with a biblical point of view, then undiscipled people do undiscipled things.
Yeah.
You know, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think if you look at the Bible, I mean, every major leader in the Bible that we love and respect, and we quote the verses, most of them were political leaders.
Yeah.
You know, you look at David, you look at Solomon, you look at Abraham, you look at Moses, you look, you know, especially all throughout the Old Testament. I mean, these were not just statesmen or prophets or king or you know, the people that had the mouthpiece of God. These actually ended up becoming political leaders.
Yeah, exactly.
And the Lord used political leaders. And I feel like right now there's a disconnect from the church because we don't want to get in politics because it's messy. So we believe in kingdom theology and the kingdom filling the whole earth, filling the sports world, filling entertainment, filling business. We want to see Christian businessmen, Christian sports stars, Christian actors, Christian leaders, but politicians, I don't know.
Yeah.
And so what happens is, as the church, if we build that kind of theology on the way that we approach life, we abdicate potentially. And here's the thing, the political realm actually is the only realm of society that regulates how everything else functions.
Yeah.
So the political realm is the one area that literally has its tentacles in every other industry, every other mountain of influence, so to speak.
Yeah.
And if we aren't being salt and light in that mountain of influence, then our children's children are going to grow up in a society that is so dark and so corrupt, led by leaders who are not believers, who do not take a stand for the things that we stand for. And we've gotten largely to this place in America because the church has said, no, we don't do politics. Where we need to take more of a Billy Graham approach, and where we need to say, you know, we're going to engage with every president. We're going to engage with every Congress. We are going to let our voice be heard. We're going to be statesmen to the world. And we are going to, we're going to get backlash. We're going to get ridiculed. We're going to get mocked. We're going to get whatever. But we know that we have a calling to bring influence to this realm.
Yeah, exactly. And I love how you brought up Billy Graham and Billy Graham, and like my music school, you know, is in Wheaton, 3 blocks away from the Billy Graham Center. I'm a Wheaton College graduate. And, you know, I think you're completely right, is that when Jesus died and rose again, and then he went to his disciples in Matthew 28 and said, all authority on heaven and earth has been given to him. You know, he didn't say that the devil is in charge of politics. I mean, there's nowhere in the scriptures where Jesus just says, okay, well, you know, the devil can do whatever he wants over there. But instead, Jesus has the keys. He's called us as to go ahead and lead in that political sphere of influence and serve. And we understand that sometimes we might run and other people might not elect us, but we are called to go for it and to lead. And so I love that, Sean. And so, you know, I want to move along here just so that we can make sure to get our time in and then help you get to the next thing. But really quickly here, you know, John 17, verse 7, Jesus just says this. He says, hey, thy word is truth. And our truth standpoint comes from the word of God, and the Holy Spirit helps lead us in the truth. And so, you know, right now, I'm going to bring up the M word. I'm going to bring up the media. And when I say, you know, the media, when I bring up the media, when I bring up truth, how should Christians, you know, who are busy, who have a lot of things going on, decipher what the truth is so that we are properly given proper understanding from the media, rather than being misled by someone in the media who doesn't have a biblical worldview, or doesn't give corroborating evidence, or doesn't give context, or doesn't give good witnesses. You know, talk to us about that.
Yeah, I mean, you have to have discernment, right? So now more than ever, you know, we have to be wise as serpents, innocent of doves.
Yeah.
We have to be really discerning. And, you know, I feel like, you know, we, especially believers, we're not called to live according to the narrative of what the world says or the media says. We're called to live according to the narrative of the kingdom.
Yeah.
And so, you know, that narrative is different. It's one that's full of hope. It's one that's full of life. It's one that he's given us a great future. And we can't get bogged down with the heaviness or the intimidation or the vitriol that the media brings, because that ultimately will allow us to be distracted from the kingdom perspective. That's a higher reality, is what that God is calling us into.
You know, any other pointers for people who want to get off the sidelines to go ahead and find out, where do I find good news? How do I check context? How do I check, you know, evidence, things like that?
I mean, my encouragement is always to, if you want to know what's happening, just check a variety of sources, and then, something that we've been doing is we've just been going out and being with people. We're hosting these worship gatherings in these times where we're going into different cities. What is God doing here? What's happening? Like, we're talking to, doctors and nurses about the virus. We're talking to politicians about the different agendas that are at play. There's more than enough research out there if you dig a little bit and you pray through stuff and you have a heart of discernment. And then some people just need to get off social media. My wife does that frequently. Like, I'm just done. I can't allow this to control my life and to determine my my view of the world right now, because God is still saying amazing things. Isaiah 6, in the year of King Uzziah's death, I saw the Lord high and lifted up. He was saying the whole earth's full of his glory. And the context of that verse is that Isaiah is in the year of the king's death. Everyone's freaking out. People are afraid. People are angry. People, everything's been shaken. And he says, I saw a superior revelation. So it's important for Christians to carry a superior revelation in a season where people are all freaking out.
Okay, yeah. So one last thing before we go ahead and wrap up here. I think, and we don't have time to really do this justice, but we've got about a minute or two here. But for me, and I'm going to bring up, ready for this? I'm going to bring up the T word here. I personally, as a Christian, am a strong supporter of President Trump. Now, I may not agree with everything he does, just like every politician. I may not agree with everything he says, just like every politician. But especially for those people who, I know, so for me, I'm a strong supporter of the president, but I know a lot of people who are on the complete opposite end of things. And then some people who just don't know how to interact with, the president. So I kind of gave you a tough question here at the end here, or some may think it's a tough question, but, for those who just don't know how to interact with the president, how would you suggest they understand the president and get good info about the president so they can see him rightly as to what's actually happening?
Well, the day that Jesus Christ runs on the ballot would be an awesome day. Until then, we're dealing with, imperfect people. And, I think for people to expect that we wholesale agree in everything that somebody does, while standing for some of the things we appreciate, is kind of ridiculous. I think it's okay for Christians to go, hey, like, there's some really good things he's done. There's some, great things we're appreciative of. And then there's some other things where we're kind of like, yeah, I wish he didn't do that. I think you could make that case for any president. For me, there's a couple issues that are hills that I die on. And they're ones that I have really strong convictions about. And, abortion is a huge one. That's one that that's a hill that I'll die on, whether that comes to Supreme Court justices, to city council members, to members of Congress, to the president. The death decree of 1973 and the, over 60, I think now 70 million babies that have been murdered on the altar of convenience is a make it or break it issue for me. Now, there are other issues too that I don't have time to go into. But I think, you have to find your convictions, and then you have to stand by those convictions. And again, like I said, a lot of times it's the lesser of two evils. I mean, a lot of times we're having to make decisions that are tough. But what we can't do is allow the mob or people to intimidate us, because we can say, hey, listen, this and this and this, they're great things. This and this and this, they're really tough. But this is the best option. And I think that's how we have to think of things. Again, Jesus is not on the ballot, neither are his disciples. And, right now in America, it's lucky to even get a Christian on the ballot. So, we got to do our best to look at the values, to look at the long game too, to look at, okay, how is this person being in leadership going to affect the future generations? You need to look at Supreme Court justices. You got to look at, you got to look at district justices. You got to look at the whole overturning of the judicial system, all the stuff. So anyway, man, it's a difficult thing, but you got to stand up for what you believe in and your convictions.